Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Cunha and I'm here today to talk to you about using dialogue in our narrative writing. Now, as you know, dialogue is when there are two characters in a story having a conversation, right? They're talking back and forth. And it's so important to use dialogue in a story because it adds detail, right? So let's take a look. So using dialogue in our writing. There are many reasons why good writers use dialogue in their writing. Some reasons we use dialogue in our writing are to add detail, relive a scene, or to reveal more information to the reader about our character's personality traits. And that is so true. When we have dialogue, so when we actually hear what characters are saying to each other, we're able to really tell what kind of character they are, right? If we hear what they're saying word by word, we're able to make our own inferences on the kind of characters that are in our story. So let's take a look at this example. Now, as we did this in class, we realized when we looked at this page, and I just opened up a random page in the book Ghost Boys, and we were able to see that there is dialogue on this page. Now, a couple of things we noticed was that every time someone speaks, there are quotation marks around the words that the characters are saying, right? Only around what the characters are saying. We also noticed, and I was so glad that you guys noticed this, we noticed that every time someone new speaks, they start a new paragraph, right? So the author will go to the next line and start a new paragraph every time there's a new character speaking. And guess what? I was so glad that you guys noticed both those things because these are rules that we need to follow when we use dialogue in our narrative stories. So let's talk about the dialogue tags, right? Now, I want you to make a connection with when you receive a gift on Christmas morning, or if you receive a gift on your birthday. So many times you will have, like, let's say it's a box, it's wrapped up with a nice big bow, and many of the times you will have a tag, right, that is attached to that box. And in the tag or on the tag, it says who it's from and maybe who it's for, right? So that tag is so important because can you imagine getting a present, a big box with a beautiful bow and not knowing who it's from? I would want to know. So it's so important to include a dialogue tag when you're also writing dialogue because you want to tell your readers who's speaking, right? Who is saying this? And sometimes a lot of students don't do this and then it becomes very confusing. So there are two parts to dialogue. Let's take a look. The first part is obviously the dialogue, which is the words, the portion of the sentence that tells me exactly what the character is saying. And of course, we use quotation marks around the words that are spoken. The second part is known as the dialogue tag. Okay, that's the tag that Ms. Cunha was just talking about with the presents. So the tag is basically identifying the speaker, right? Just like a tag on a present identifies who the gift is from. You, as a writer, needs to identify who the dialogue is from or who these words are from. So did you know that there are 3 ways that you can use a dialogue tag? You can use it at the beginning of a sentence, you can use it at the middle of a sentence, or you can use it at the end of the sentence. So let's take a look at these examples. If you notice in purple, these are the dialogue tags, right? Dad smiled. Mary replied. Dave shrieked. So yes, they used the other words except said, right? We want to try to stay away from always using the word said because then it's so repetitive. But if you look at this example, Dad smiled is the dialogue tag here, and it's at the beginning of the sentence. So Dad smiled, you look just like your mother. These are the words he said, right? Now in the middle, Mary is the one who's speaking here. I see it on the dialogue tag. It says Mary replied. I'm not sure, Mary replied, but I could ask the teacher. Now this gets tricky when you use the tag in the middle of the sentence. Because if you notice, this here, I'm not sure, but I could ask the teacher, that's what Mary says, right? And that's one sentence. The I'm not sure could be considered a sentence, but it doesn't sound very complete. So that is why we added comma here. And then it's kind of telling us that the dialogue tag is coming up. And then there's the rest of her sentence, okay? So notice that the the quotation marks here only go exactly around the words that Mary said. The next example is using the dialogue tag at the end. Sometimes you could do that as well, right? Did you see the size of that pizza slice? Dave shrieked. So notice Dave is speaking this at the beginning, right? It ends with a question mark because he is asking a question, but the dialogue tag is at the end. So now let's talk about the 5 rules that you must follow when you use dialogue in your stories. Rule number 1, every time a speaker changes, start a new paragraph. This means you go to the next line and indent the line with each speaker. Basically, you indent every time someone new speaks, right? And you all notice that. So let's take a look at these examples. If you're going to notice, these red arrows are telling you or showing you what the rule is talking about. So in this example, there's 2 characters speaking. We have Camilla speaking, and then we also have Katie speaking. And I see that because of the dialogue tags. Notice the dialogue tag in this example is in the middle of the sentence, right? And then at the next part, the dialogue tag is at the end of the sentence. So because we have 2 characters speaking, after Camilla speaks and Katie responds to her, we started a new paragraph. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, quotation marks show where the exact words of a speaker begin and end. So basically, you need to have quotation marks exactly around the words that the character is speaking, just like you see in the example there. Rule number 3, capitalize the first word in a quotation when it starts the sentence. Basically, this means that every time a person speaks, at the very beginning of the sentence, no matter what word they start with, it needs to be capitalized. Now, in this example, the first word that Camilla says is Katie. So we know Katie is a proper noun, so it would have to be capitalized anyway. But let's say that she didn't start with Katie and she just started with, let's go to the mall today, Camilla said. So the L in let's would be capitalized. So you must start it with the capital letter as soon as the character speaks. Rule number 4, a quotation mark or exclamation point, takes the place of the comma. This means you put the question mark or exclamation point before the end quotation and skip the comma. All right, this one gets a little confusing. This rule 4 and 5 go together, so it'll make better sense when I show you rule 4. Rule 5. But basically what this says is if the character is asking a question, you need to put a question mark, obviously, right? So let's look at this example. Katie, do you want to go to the mall today? Camilla asked. Camilla's asking a question, right? She's asking Katie if she wants to go to the mall. So it needs to have a question mark there. Sometimes a character might be saying something with a lot of emotion, right? A lot of expression, and it might have an exclamation mark. So if that is the case, then you have to put an exclamation mark. But, as rule number 5 states, if it is not a question and the character is not shouting it out or trying to show a lot of emotion, then it needs to be a comma. Okay, especially if you have the dialogue tag at the end or in the middle, right? If the dialogue tag is in the front or the beginning of the sentence, then you just put a period there. So rule number 5, a comma separates the quotation from the words that tell who is speaking, aka the dialogue tag, right? So look at that comma there. Some quotations are divided in 2. If quotations are divided, don't capitalize the second part of the sentence and use commas to separate the quotation from the speaker. So notice, Katie, if we go to the mall, Camilla said, you can buy a gift for your mom. Notice that the author interrupts Camilla's sentence by telling us the dialogue tag or telling us who is speaking. So Camilla really says this. Katie, if we go to the mall, you can buy, let's do that again. Sorry, I clicked it by mistake. So Camilla really says, Katie, if we go to the mall, you can buy a gift for your mom. But because the author uses the dialogue tag in the middle, we do have to close the quotations, right? She only says this first, and then she continues with this. So there's that quotation mark, right, at the end. Notice where the commas go. Comma here because it's telling us there's just the dialogue tag coming up. There's another comma here because this is telling us, hey, she's not done talking, right? The rest is part of what Camilla says. And then notice that because she's not done talking, the Y is lowercase, right? Remember, it only becomes a capital at the beginning when they first start talking. So boys and girls, I want you to notice that you do have these notes in your Google Classroom. So the next couple of slides are some additional examples to show you these different rules, okay? And then we did go over these together as a class. So you have these in your notes as well. If you are missing any of these notes for whatever reason, you can pause this video and make sure that you have these answers.